Somewhere in East Africa right now, a hunter-gatherer is lying in the shade, doing absolutely nothing, and he finished all his work for the day hours ago. Meanwhile, you're probably watching this on a lunch break, or squeezing it in before your next meeting. This is the story of what an ordinary day actually looked like for almost the entire span of human existence, and why researchers who study it keep describing it as somehow easier than ours. For nearly 300,000 years, this was simply what being human meant. Then, in the blink of evolutionary time, we traded it for something else, and most of us never stopped to ask whether it was a fair trade. In the 1960s, an anthropologist named Richard Lee decided to actually measure it instead of guessing. He followed a hunting and gathering community in the Kalahari Desert and tracked every single activity, down to the minute, for months. When he finally added it all up, the number stunned him. About 15 hours of work a week. Not 15 hours a day. 15 hours total to cover hunting, gathering, and every chore required to stay alive. There was no boss checking in, no rent due at the end of the month, no alarm clock deciding when the day officially began. Let's actually walk through what a day like that looked like. It starts with the sky slowly getting lighter and the sounds of a small camp waking up around you, 20 or 30 people, every one of whom you have known your entire life. Your bed is a hide laid over flattened grass. Everything you personally own could fit in a single small bag. There is no rush because there is nowhere else to be. The first real activity of the morning isn't work at all. It's talking. Researchers who spent time recording daily conversation in these communities found that people spent hours simply discussing each other. Who did what? Who said what? Who seemed a little off lately? It sounds like idle gossip, but anthropologists argue it was functioning as something closer to an entire legal and social system, built entirely out of conversation. If someone got greedy, people didn't file a complaint. They made jokes about him until the behavior quietly stopped. There's a famous story that captures this perfectly. When Richard Lee, that same researcher, wanted to thank the community for their hospitality one Christmas, he bought the biggest, fattest ox he could find in the entire region. Instead of gratitude, he got mockery. People told him the ox was scrawny, the meat would probably be terrible, and he'd clearly wasted his money. Confused, he eventually asked an elder what was going on. The answer he got has become one of the most quoted lines in anthropology. When a hunter brings back an impressive kill, the community doesn't celebrate him. They deliberately insult it. The bigger the kill, the harsher the mockery, specifically to stop a skilled hunter from ever starting to think he was better than everyone else. Lee hadn't just given a gift. He'd accidentally handed the community a chance to remind him that nobody gets to feel superior here, no matter how impressive the kill. As the morning goes on, some of the men head out to hunt. And here's something that rarely makes it into the popular imagination. Hunting mostly fails. Researchers who spent years following Hadza hunters in Tanzania found that on most days, they come back completely empty-handed. A successful large kill might happen once every several days. A single hunt can mean walking many miles, tracking a wounded animal for hours, and still coming home with nothing but a couple of small birds. When a kill does happen, though, it's often dramatic. Arrows tipped with plant-based poison, animals tracked patiently for hours while the poison works. But here's the detail that surprises most people. Hunting isn't actually what keeps the camp fed day to day. That's the women's job, and they're extraordinarily good at it. In many of these communities, women bring in more than half of the camp's total calories, heading out in small groups every single day to dig, climb, and gather food that doesn't depend on luck the way a hunt does. And the most productive foragers in the entire camp usually aren't young. They're grandmothers, women in their 50s, 60s, even 70s, regularly out gathering women decades younger. Some researchers call this the grandmother hypothesis, and it may explain something genuinely unusual about our species. Human women are one of the only mammals that live for decades after their reproductive years end. And one theory is that this happened specifically because older women feeding grandchildren made entire family lines more successful. Children, meanwhile, aren't sitting in a classroom somewhere far away. They're right there, playing beside the adults doing real work. A toddler plays with a small digging stick next to their mother. By around 6, a child can already find some food independently. By 8, a boy might be sent out alone with a small bow and actually come home with something. Researchers who studied dozens of traditional communities found that children mostly learned by watching, copying, and playing in mixed age groups, older kids naturally teaching younger ones, with adults rarely stepping in to instruct directly. This wasn't a lesser version of school. For most of human history, this simply was school. By midday, whatever food has come in gets shared immediately, and sharing here isn't generosity in the way we usually think of it. It's closer to a strict rule. A hunter who brings down a large animal typically doesn't get to keep it. He distributes it, often keeping one of the worst cuts for himself. Some researchers believe this constant, careful tracking of who gave what to whom, who reciprocated and who didn't, may have been one of the pressures that helped shape the size and complexity of the human brain. Keeping a mental ledger of an entire camp's social debts is a genuinely difficult cognitive task, and evolution apparently rewarded whoever got good at it. As the heat of early afternoon sets in, the pace of the entire camp slows dramatically. Nobody pushes through the hottest hours. People nap, repair tools, weave baskets, and spend long stretches doing something that looks, on the surface, unproductive, picking through each other's hair. It sounds strange out of context, but it functions as an extended excuse for physical closeness with people you love, something modern life often quietly starves us of. Conflicts still happened, of course. These were real people, not saints, jealousy, stolen tools, old grudges resurfacing. But the way disagreements ended looks almost nothing like ours. In a lifestyle where everything you own fits in a bag you can carry, one common solution to an unbearable conflict was simply to walk to a different camp for a while. Researchers studying these groups nicknamed it voting with your feet. By the time you returned weeks later, the tension had usually cooled entirely on its own. Try resolving a serious dispute that way, with a mortgage and a fixed job waiting for you on Monday. As the sun drops lower, the pace picks back up. People visit neighboring camps, catch up with relatives, and trade news that will travel. Mouth to mouth, across dozens of connected communities for years. By adulthood, a person in this kind of society might personally know over 100 people by name, along with most of their life history. By evening, the hunters return, usually without much to show for the day, and cooking begins around the fire, roots roasted in coals, meat softened for the children. The entire camp eating together, the way it has happened, essentially unchanged, for roughly 300,000 years. None of this was paradise. People still got sick, children still died young, at rates far higher than almost anywhere in the world today. People still grieved, still fought, still hurt each other sometimes. But there was a particular kind of suffering they apparently didn't carry, the slow, low-grade exhaustion of spending most of your waking hours on something you don't actually believe in, just to eventually afford a life you rarely have time to enjoy. In the late 1960s, one anthropologist looking at evidence like this coined a phrase that still gets quoted today, the original affluent society. He didn't mean these communities were wealthy in any material sense. They owned almost nothing. What he meant was that they had an abundance of something we quietly ran out of: time. To be completely fair, the trade we eventually made wasn't nothing. We got vaccines, we got modern medicine, refrigeration, and running water. We got dramatically longer average lifespans, and far fewer children dying before the age of 5, a number that used to be devastatingly high in a small hunting and gathering camp. Nobody serious is arguing we should abandon all of that. But we also made trades that rarely get mentioned out loud. We invented work that somebody else owns. We invented bosses, deadlines, and bills that never actually stop arriving. And underneath all of it, we're still carrying the exact same bodies and the exact same brains that were built for a very different kind of day, one with far more sunlight, far more physical closeness. far more unstructured time, and far, far less sitting still, staring at a screen, waiting for a day that technically ended hours ago to actually be allowed to end. We didn't stop being hunter-gatherers. We just stopped living like one.